film we are about to look at is a film that I was first introduced to in 1966. I came to work at Texas A&M University, Animal Science Department. Dr. O.D. Butler, the head of the department, after I'd been there about a month, he said, "What do you think of our quarter horse film?" And I said to him, "What film? I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, we got one." And he said, "Find it and let me know what you think. Find it and look at it." So I didn't know what he was talking about, so I began to look and ask all the other staff members. And I finally found this film on 2 different floors of the old building in 2 different staff members' offices, and it was in the form of 4 small reels. I got the 4 small reels, started looking at them one at a time, tried to figure out what sequence the guy shot them in, and then put them all into one big reel. So the big reel we're going to see here, and you'll notice towards the end of this film, it was the last little reel that I added to it, and it was pretty obvious the guy that made the film, this was what he had edited out. And he edited out, but he didn't throw it away. I call it the scraps reel. And out of that reel, we got some real jewels. Understand that it was made in 1940, which I must say was the same time the association was being formed. There was no rule book, handbook at that time, and it was a guy's effort to try to just pictorially show us what they were doing, what the horses were they were starting with, and the horses they were registered. Now this is what we saw, this is what we got when we began to look at the film. He titled it The American Quarter Horse. Incidentally, it was silent. There was nothing with it other than what you see here. And he was trying to do a pictorial summary of the quarter horse. He presented it to A&M College of Texas in the name of Ann Burnett Hall, produced by James Goodwin Hall, who was Ann Burnett's husband at that time, and he was the first treasurer of the Quarter Horse Association. So he made this, and where his expertise came from, I really don't know about film, but he made a pretty good film for our history books here. All he's trying to say here that before AQHA ever started their registry, and they were just getting started when this film was made, that there were other stud books in existence. He showed a copy here of the American stud book that had different kinds of horses in it. I think maybe the Arabs were in there at that time. See, Arabs and Barbs and maybe even before the thoroughbreds were being registered. But he's trying to show here that what the horse was and where he came from. So he went back. This is a King Ranch shot. Anybody that's ever been around Texas, as much as I have, I've been to a lot of these places. I was only about 10 years difference from my association with it. They're only about 10 years old when I got pretty involved with them. But this is where a lot of it started. This is Bob Clayburgh of King Ranch, and this is where supposedly the start of the National Cutting Horse Association. But we cut on them for 10, 15 years before we ever formed the Cutting Horse Association. And that was the way. Incidentally, I want you to see the heading and heeling in 1940 was really heading and heeling. And you notice both riders were tied hard and fast. We didn't know how to dally anything in Texas in 1940. And every fairgrounds in South Texas had a racetrack on it. And we were really involved in the speed of these horses. We cut on them, we cowboyed on them, but we wanted to run horse races too. This is J.K. Northway standing here Bob Claybert was one of the King Ranch horses, and J.K. Northway is a longtime veterinarian that worked at the King Ranch and helped develop these horses. I'm amazed at how they were trying to describe them in 1940, probably pretty close to the way we would today. And you look at the automobiles in the background, and there's not any question about when the film was made. Pretty good horses too. Trying to show them, I'm amazed at how they called them bulldog horses, and it's not a bulldog in this picture, not a bulldog in this film. I can talk about them later. They came 10 years later, maybe 15 years after these, because good sloping shoulder and refined withers, and you know, the same things we look at a lot in today. I'm not sure this horse is as sloping anywhere as we would like for him to be, but he serves as a good example what they were looking at, trying to describe the horse to people as they started out, what they were trying to raise and breed. And free, true, free, and collected. I don't know whether all of those are the same. Free and collected, are those not contradictory? But we can pick at them. The effort was made here. A good one, I think, to show us what they had. And there's some nice horses right here in the beginning. You see some horses that would be good today. Be good today. We would be and have some pride to own them. Now here's the old Clegg sorrel, sold and bred by Billy Clegg. George Clegg, I'm sorry. He raised a horse he named Billy Clegg. George Clegg raised old sorrel, sold him to the King Ranch, and led him 25 miles down there in 1940 when they took delivery on him. He was a yearling, and they led him that 25 miles horseback to deliver him to the ranch. You got to think there wasn't a lot of, slant load horse trailers in 1940. And what you'll see so much of them doing, this is Macanuda. Nothing bulldog about him. He's 15.3 and out of the old sorrel, and which if you look at him again at old sorrel, the picture there was a half-blood. Peppy, oh boy, here's 15.2. This is a horse that really tore up the cutting horse world for years. This horse is the start of all of the Peppy lines of horses. And you'd look at him, you'd like to have him today. He was the prettiest horse, I think, in this whole film of horses that were foundation sires. And he was probably about 3 years old right here. And you can see what a pretty horse he was. We've got a lot more footage of him in here being sold. I want you to look at Wimpy, number 1. He given that number 1 number. He was 15-1. He got that, but then got the number 1 number by being named Grand Champion Stallion at the 1941, I think, stock show in Fort Worth. So he was the Grand Champion Stallion. But he wasn't a little bulldog horse. He was a big horse. He was a stout horse. And I think that's what we like to look at here. What did we start with and where we are now? In some places, we're not as well as we were in probably 1940. If you look at the soundness that was in a lot of these horses and the way we bred them and what they had to do to survive and to come forward, interesting to notice that here it says a type quarter horse foal. The Mustang is more involved in the early development of this breed than I thought they were, but they were. See, here's Sue. She's a granddaughter of old Sorrel. And these are South Texas cowboys riding them. And this is all we knew how to do to show you our horse. Go lope circles on them and change leads. We didn't know whether they changed leads or not, but they sure went the other direction. And you can see that this South Texas cowboy would not be very good in a hog catching contest. They'd all get between his legs. There's plenty of room. Spent his life riding horses. Here's Katrina, again, a mare for us to look at. Africana cattle that the King Ranch tried to introduce back in the 40s. But this mare would look good today to us. The thing that's to notice about this film, the horses haven't changed near as much as the people. And the people and what we have identified to do with them, have we changed the training program, have we identified what they want them to do, but the horses are not that much different. What you see Bob Clayburgh doing there, that is cutting a cow out, and you understand why the NCHA says drive him, because he had to take him somewhere. And those old timers took a lot of pride in never touching that saddle horn. And more than anything, he'd have his offhand in his leggings pocket. And he just, as you watch them ride them. But that's where it all started. And there's her first hot quit. And maybe that's a complete loss. That's probably a 5-point penalty. He's a good horse. And broodmare of Cotton-Eyed Joe breeding. I don't know that much about Cotton-Eyed Joe breeding. I'd just have to see it in a lot of pedigrees. But we would be proud of this mare today. She's typey, she's balanced, she's a good mare. Now on the 4-6 ranch in Guthrie, I grew up about 40 miles from here, and I know a lot about this country and these horses. Rainy day, there I think goes back to Midnight. Midnight's going to go back to Badger. But this old gelding, a lot of them, everybody used to ride him that come to the ranch. This broodmare's here by Tom. His full name was Gray Tom Scooter. And he left a really set of good mares there that are in maybe the 5th generation of some of those horses now. But I never saw him, but look at this foal that walked out there, that gray foal. You would be proud of him today. So there were some nice horses back there in the beginning as we were trying to breed and cross and raise what you wanted to raise. And you got to realize that the famous horses then, if you wanted to own a horse that had a reputation, he was a racehorse, because that's the only way you could get a reputation. There wasn't any AQHA shows, there wasn't any NCHA, NRHA, there wasn't any rein cow horse. So the horses that had a reputation were racehorses. Everybody had a racetrack around their fairgrounds. Bel F, working under saddle. This horse, the rumor is that Mr. George Humphreys won the reining at Fort Worth on him one year when you didn't have a pattern. You just showed them to him. And he was partly, the old timers called him a good handling horse. Quarter horse mares, and everything back in the beginning here, everything was pasture bred. Mares were selected and turned out with a stallion, probably not over 20, maybe a few more for some studs. Tom Burnett Ranch at Highway Park, that was also a part of what later became the Triangle Ranches. Triangles and the 4-6s was the result of a son of a man and his son. Tom Burnett and his son, Burke. Burke started the 4-6s, and then Tom started the triangles. And this was common because you can say that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. These old jennies would. They'd learn to drink when they went, because they may not go back for a few days. But that was common, to halter break them by bell count them to those old jennies. This horse, Lucky Strike there, I rode a cutting horse by him one time, a son of him. Know much about his pedigree, but he still shows up in some of the good pedigrees. It was rather common to catch a horse, you just put a rope around his neck. So we had showmanship at rope, not halter. Billy, this horse right here is a result of steel dust breeding, and these Billy horses were famous. It was a line of horses, and he is a result of a cross on a steel dust mare. Bill Thomas was by Billy, I think. And you can see that most people handling them then, they were lots of khaki breeches. I'm sorry, but blue jeans hadn't caught a hold. This was made right before World War II. I'm not sure that Levi's and Wranglers were going real good, but there was lots of khaki breeches. R.L. Underwood is one of the early day breeders. Wichita Falls, Highway Park. This horse and another one we're going to show you here. I was noticing a pedigree research of a great cutting mare years ago named Jill's Lady, and both of these horses are in her pedigree. This old Redwood, this is Golden Chief. He's 24 years old here. What kind of horse is he? Big horse, sound-footed, so forth. Look at old Redwood here. I think there's some question about how he was bred, some question about his pedigree, but I want you to look at him with soundness of feet and legs. And you could take him as we know him today and sweat a little off his neck, clean him up a little, and we wouldn't mind leading him out before anybody. Del Rio Joe, that's taken right behind the Animal Science Building at Texas A&M, and that's Bob Denhart who owned him, and I think this may be the prettiest horse on the whole film, if it's not him or Peppy. But this horse was a great horse. Won all the early day quarter horse shows. He got lost by being bought by a ranch that didn't perpetuate him, and they raised a lot of good horses by him, but they let the registry of them go to pot. Del Rio Joe. This is 1940, a quarter horse show at Tucson. They didn't know how to hold a show yet. Didn't have a handbook. Didn't know what we were going to do. Little Joe Jr. here, he was a great racehorse. A great racehorse. And this guy that owns him here, I forget his name, but he lived over at Bandera, Texas. This is Jim Minnick. He was an early day first inspector for the associations. Some of the winners lining up, you see Peppy won it. And I don't think Del Rio Joe was there then. He was another one of them real pretty horses. But there was not a lot of sophistication to it. We took a lot of pride, hanging a ribbon on the halter then. We didn't really know how to show them, but we wanted to bring them out. We wanted people to see them. Some of these old horses, you hope maybe they were sterile. Man, you don't know. Because some of them look better than others, and you don't know really until you do a lot of pedigree research. But I want you to look at this mare, Mae West, owned by Jack Casement, Steamboat. They called her desirable in 1940, and Jack Casement was a man that stood in and fought for the Bulldog horses. Well, he called that mare Bulldog. And the Bulldogs didn't come in until 15 years later. There's not a Bulldog on this film. But Jack Casement was a promoter, and because as compared to what? See, that was a desirable kind in 1940. Now this old Jim Minnick, he says the judge tried him out. I don't know how much they did this just for the film, but I know as a judge of 40 years, I'd have got killed if I'd have said, let me ride your horse for and figure out who's got the best one. But that was the judge. and true maneuverability of the horse looks pretty good. Boy, the horsemanship of the cowboy, see, that has changed so much. And you know, the cowboy, this old boy's gonna fly on this side if you just leave him alone. But the horses haven't changed near as much as the people and what we want to do with them. Looks like we're teasing a mare here in a halter class. We wasn't too sophisticated in what we were doing. Good quarter horses on parade. Look right here. There he is. Come right in. That's Peppy right there. He's leading. And that's the breeder of Old Sorrel that took a hold of him there. And there's this Jack Casement with this good mare they called a desirable kind. Peppy was a grand champion. We've seen enough of him to know he was pretty. There he is. And scenes of the first, we had a quarter horse count meeting. D.W. Williams at this time right here was the head of the animal science department at Texas A&M. And I come to find out he was well sought after as a judge in the early days. Yeah, pretty nice horses. There's some nice horses in this film. And you could see some of them, you'd look at them and think, well, they had a little problem here or there. But there was enough gene pool in here to do what you wanted to with them. This mare looked good today. And there was a gene pool here where if you did the right selection like you wanted, you could come out of there with the horses we have today. I keep forgetting his name, but that was George Clegg that was leading Wimpy there a while ago. George is the man that raised Old Sorrel and sold him to the King Range, the sire of Wimpy. Peppy, excuse me, not Wimpy, Peppy. Helen Michaelis here. She probably did more to start the association than Bob Denhart did. Bob only got it started 1 year, and then she had it for about 4 or 5 years in her home in Eagle Pass, Texas. This Joe Tom horse right here, the Cowboys used to fight to get one of them because they were really good calf roping horses. He was the son of Joe Hancock. This Juanita mare there is a full sister to Little Joe Jr. Tom Burnett bought her and changed her name to Conformation, and she founded a whole line of mares at the Triangle Range. She was a full sister to Little Joe. I checked that out in the records in Amarillo, and yes, there was an application for a name change, and the story is true. A lot of this I know from being around it during the early years of my life, but a lot of it I know from what people have stood up in meetings and said, told me about them, people that have been there. Always was gonna run them. And you'll look here in a minute, back in 1940, you see a little Texas pari-mutuel take place, which is side bets. Odd Adams, Dwayne Hughes, very instrumental. Raised, I think Odd Adams had all the Billy horses. Dwayne Hughes lived in San Angelo. He paid for the organization. There you go. Go and get your billfold out. He paid for the organizational meeting dinner that organized them in 1940 in Fort Worth. This is a match race, which was rather common. I've seen them run down a turn row on a cotton field, where we'd go have match races on Sunday afternoons. Just before the next race, this is where the Texas pari-mutuel takes place, I think. I used to tell the paint horse people, 23 seconds later. If a horse one of the requirements for registry is to be able to run a quarter of a mile in 23 seconds. Or, it says, perform their duties that a ranch horse had to do, as if those were both complementary to each other. We got the high school band out marching for us. At the parade, and it wouldn't be complete without a mariachi band, and I think they'll come along here in a minute. But this was a part of the times in 1940. Now we're going to skip around here a little, pretty quick. This is back scraps out of that first part of the film we saw. Some more of these colts being led around and filmed. Bob Clayburgh holding one of them. And we'll just jump around here in the next few shots, and you'll see there's Peppy. What a pretty horse. That's the old gentleman, Wichita Falls, leading him. Now this I knows back and looked from the trees. I want to say it's a King Ranch shot, but I'm surprised at the amount of color that's in there. Old sorrel, the sorrel color was associated with King Ranch horses. Now this one right here I know is in North Texas. That's the old red dirt around Guthrie, Paducah, and in that country. And there's a lot. They always had a gray stud, at least one. Gray Tom Scooter, we've already talked about. They had all of the gray Badger horses were there, and they always had some of them. That was probably the first paint to run across there that they didn't want to show. But he was Now here we're going to see, when we get through with this, get back to it, the stud Roan Hancock, the son of Joe Hancock. We're going to see Joe Hancock here in a little bit, and look quickly. We don't show much of him. There's Roan Hancock. That's Little Joe Jr. That's back at Tucson. That's the scraps of what is left over that he took out of this film. This is Hugh Bennett's horse. Hugh Bennett was a world champion cowboy in the Rodeo Association, later became president of AQHA. And this horse, I forgot his name, was quite famous. I think we're teasing mares here. I don't know, these may be standard breds. I don't know what they are. But again, that's what we used to do. Old horse trader used to come to my house to try to sell trade horses. My daddy would do this to everything he had. He said he can put a chicken in a stovepipe and mind both ends of it. I don't know what this means, except maybe this mare had twins and one of them was a bay and the other was a sorrel. I really don't know. But there's some of the horses that were around at the time this film was made. This mare, I know I've read about her. She was an early day match race champion. That's her colt. Her and her colt in South Texas. You've read a lot about Panzareta. She was a tough campaigner on the brush tracks. Paul L. I don't know much about Paul L. except I've heard the name. Paul L. mare, she's probably by Paul L. But I want you to look at Chicaro Bill. We'll show him to you again before this film's over. The first quarter horses to ever run out of 3 bars were all out of Chicaro Bill mares. Chicaro Annie C was C bars his mother, and there's 3 of those horses. They were all full brothers. They were the first ones to ever run were out of Chicaro Bill mares. This is showmanship at rope. The start of showmanship at halter. You look at some of these and you'll see some nice colts. Now here's Ron Hancock again. He's the son of Joe Hancock, and there was a whole line of these horses that were really good horses. And we're going to see another son of Joe Hancock here in a minute that left a lot of nice horses in Arizona. We're just jumping around. John Dial was a thoroughbred horse owned by the King Ranch. There was later a quarter horse named Johnny Dial that was quite a running horse. But this is a thoroughbred horse. That's Little Joe Jr. and his full sister Juanita that Tom Burnett bought and changed the name to Conformation. This gelding, I didn't talk about him when we saw him earlier. Red Rooster was the grand champion gelding of the first show they ever held, which was in Stamford, Texas in 1940. That was the grand champion gelding. This was the grand champion stud right there. That was Del Rio Joe. Red Rooster, I checked on him. I want to see how he was bred. He was a gelding, and they never registered him. He was never registered, although the records show that the grand champion gelding was Red Rooster. And you can see what kind of gelding he was. He was a big, good-looking gelding, but he was not registered. The old-timers saw no need to register the geldings. So a lot of them were not registered. These are some 3-year-old steers, I think, on the King Range. Now here comes, running out of there, that's Chicaro Bill again. And again, that out of Chicaro, first 3 bars, there's Joe Hancock. Big horse, but very attractive, pretty horse. Oh, that's the best shot I've ever seen of him. All the old black and white pictures of him show him as a very ugly horse. He's very poor when the pictures was made, in poor condition. But you can see here, he was a good horse. This is pictures were taken at the Triangles at Paducah, Texas. Some of these horses I know very little about, and they're not identified. Here's a good-looking yearling. You bet he'd be good today compared to that one, which wouldn't be too good today. Now we're going to see, here's Hollywood Gold as a yearling, I think probably a 2-year-old, but he's born in 1940, so this might have been shot in 41 when he was a yearling. That's Hollywood Gold. I've told a few people, I questioned that was Hollywood Gold. They said, why? And I said, I don't think he could run that fast, because he was not known. He was the only horse that the Burnett Estates ever had and didn't have a race background. Here's what is this horse called Red Man. He was an own son of Joe Hancock. Left a set of horses in Arizona called Red Joe of Arizona. War Chief, I don't know much about him, but apparently we're inspecting him here. We didn't know, we were not real sharp on how to present them. This is the old kind of stake race, and we got the college student with a polo playing outfit on, and he's pretty well beat our cowboy, because I think he fell off down there on the end. So that's a story of a lot of the old foundation horses and how people started and brought them forward.